News on Saturday morning. Good morning to everybody. You are tuned into Intex News, and this is Straight Up the Middle. I am your co-host, Attorney Clint in Paris, and I was out last week, and I'm happy to be back, and I am joined in studio by none other than the renowned local public commentator, Sweet Pete Edwards. Good morning, Pete. How you doing? Outstanding. Outstanding. Well, good. Well, I appreciate you holding it down last week, and it feels like an eternity, Pete, week to week, in the things that happen that are out there that we can talk about and we can cover, and it's just tough trying to drill it down to a few things. You have brought up something that I think people across the country are dealing with, and that is education deficits that school districts around this country are going to be having to deal with deficits in education. And on the education front, if I could take just a brief moment of privilege, for those people who are tuning into us on Facebook, I'm going to ask you to go to the Intex News website and listen there. If you scroll down, you can see the video, but to hear both Pete and I need you to go to the website, that's intexnews.com, click on the live button, and you can hear my comments. You can also hear Pete as well. We're having some issues with YouTube and Facebook getting all the feeds through there. So I don't want anybody to miss any of the discussion. So for those of you tuning in on Facebook and on YouTube, go over to the Intex News website page, click on the live button, and you can hear Pete now. Pete, I want to point out something that education-wise happened historic last week at my alma mater, Stetson. In 1990, Stetson brought in a young professor by the name of Professor Dorothea Bean. She came in with a great record of humanitarian work at the United Nations, The Hague, and she was the first Black tenured professor at Stetson. Well, she retired this year after being there for 30 years, working hard and whatnot. But here's what happened, Pete, that was profound. The Black alumni appealed to Stetson to allow them to designate a scholarship in Professor Bean's honor, funded exclusively by African American alums. And I'm happy to say that we endowed that scholarship last week, and it is dedicated to Black students coming to Stetson. It touches on that funding component that I think you want to talk about in public education. And that is what's going to happen now, Pete, in all these school districts coming back online who have deficits, like in Hillsborough County. What are these districts going to do? Right. That's going back away. Well, now I know what building because I went to the new Jefferson, uh, that's out over in Carver City, and I remember there being some discussions about that and people being moved around and relocating out of that area into and what it meant to that area, and how that school was going to be repurposed and those kinds of things. But what's the effect? You mentioned the independent school. To expand on that a little bit, Pete. What that means for yeah. And this is something, to Pete, that I think is consistent no matter where you are with large school districts. That if you don't have a vocal minority community engaged early in the process, we don't want to wait till the budget comes out and everything is already fixed in place. The way that you affect this thing is on the front end, and it is absolutely something that's drawn along a political spectrum. And we've seen a number of things, Pete, that have come out on a political spectrum that people should be concerned about. One of those recent political things is this new um, anti-riot bill that just got voted through the legislature here in the state of Florida. Now, it's Republican led, and I was surprised. First of all, that there was nearly as much discussion about it. Because pretty much, in Florida for a couple of decades now, Pete, the Republican legislature and Republican, governor, they pretty much did what they wanted to do. They didn't have much to say. I was surprised there was even this much discussion about this. And to give everybody the background on this, let me see if I get it right, Pete. You tell me if I got this right. After the protest last summer, the governor came out and said, "Hey, look, we need to, add some more criminal penalties for people involved in these public protests." And they came up with a way to enhance criminal penalties if they occur during quote unquote riots per se, whatever that means, or violent protests. And they just basically made it easier for law enforcement to criminalize protest activities. Is that a good generalization of?
Also because they want to see it's part of the big picture of taking away rights. It's part of the big picture of this last gasp of white superiority. Let me give you a good example of that law. Those laws are already on the books. That enhancement uh, doesn't mean anything. They're just trying to twist the knife in somebody's back. Okay, For an example, they say, well, if you're protesting and then you block somebody's business per se or something like that, they can enhance the penalty. Now, think of two scenarios. If we're out in front of the police station and we're making a lot of noise and the traffic slows down and all, then that could be just basically trying to stir up a riot. So the police can arrest all the young people and the black and brown people. Got it? Now look at it
Got
on
it.
the other end. Let's say the anti-abortion people are protesting in front of Planned Parenthood, which they do a lot. You can go right there on Fletcher and see that. And they try to block young women and their spouse or partner going in to seek Planned Parenthood services or abortion and all like that. Do you really think that white officers are going to arrest the anti-abortion people? It ain't gonna happen. So that's one of the think about that. Now that's one of the issues there. Or let's say you got the evangelical white Christians, which is a front for, in my opinion, they're not Christians at all. It's a front to represent the religious aspect of what America is fast has become. They can do a lot of things, and they can raise all kind of saying. Do you really think the police department going to arrest them? When if you got black ministers that just sit down on the sidewalk and protest, you can bet not only will they be arrested, they probably will be enhanced penalties because they didn't move quick enough. So that law, when you look at it, you're a lawyer, you do criminal law and everything else, so you know that law is fake. The different
Right.
statutes is already there. Now here's the other thing, Clint, before you go on. One key component to this is the type of attorney, state attorney you will have that will make the decision on the charges coming up once the governor signs this law next week. Give you a good example. You may have a protester may have a better chance of getting a charge like that dismissed in Hillsborough County versus Pinellas County, or versus the state attorney in Lake and Ocala area.
Or
So,
Polk or somewhere.
right. So
And the
yeah,
ruler.
as a
Right.
rule. So that's where we at. But again, you point on early, whether the school system, whether these kind of laws, we have to stay consistent. And as I talked about it before you went on leave last week, we have to build a backbench of support. We truly don't have a coalition with anybody now. And it has hurt us because what America has become is the American style of Nazi Germany, along with what occurred immediately after the end of Reconstruction. So you got those two forces that are trying to either come together or try to do their own thing in destroying America as a land of equality and all, and trying to make it into white supremacy. If you don't believe it, look what happened with three congressmen yesterday. They declared that they're going to have a caucus in Congress that strictly deals with, forget about the Freedom Caucus, which is conservative, but this right-wing caucus with Marjorie Greene and a guy from Alabama. They want to protect Anglo-Saxon values all the way to the architectural structure of the buildings. Go figure.
Well, then you think about this though, but won't that drive a reaction? I mean, one of the things that you have to realize when you have power, and you've got Republican legislatures all over the country with power. If you go too far, you're going to get a commensurate reaction in the other direction. Now, what can Democrats or those not in power in the legislature in the governor's office do as a response to this? One of my thoughts is going to be you may end up with things like maybe potential boycotts, like you have in Georgia, to this kind of a law. Also, you're going to get, when the election time comes up, you're giving whoever comes up on the Democratic side key talking points to make them to motivate them as to why you have to be involved in the political process, because these are the kind of things that are going to happen. Isn't that what they're setting up, though? They're giving Democrats key points for the next election?
I disagree, because here's the key. The key group is independents. You have a lot of Republicans who have joined the independent ranks because they don't like the extremeness of where the Republican Party is now. You have a lot of Democrats who have joined the independent ranks because they don't like left-wing extremism. So the black community, what it has to do, it has to re-energize the coalition that the civil rights movement had. They had a little bit of everybody. And as we have to teach our children that, listen, they're coming after you. They're coming after your Jewish friends and family. They're coming after conservative and middle of the road white folks, and they're going to try to destroy us all. And then we have to remind these young people now, particularly the millennials, you got to go beyond a quick photo op, a quick talking moment. And what has happened in the state of Florida, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, there is no coalition uh, that's involving the black community, the Democratic Party, good Republicans, and the majority of people who are now becoming more independent because they don't like either the Democrats or the Republican Party. And until that happens, things are going to get worse. And sad to say, but we're in trouble. And if we don't get it straightened out, America is going to be the second home of Nazi Germanism type thinking, right wing extremist thinking that as a result that came out immediately after Reconstruction. And what it's going to do is going to make America weak all over when they have to come up against the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, and North Koreans. And keep in mind, things have gotten so bad that we can't even depend on our brothers and sisters from Africa because America has ignored them. And who are the greatest players in Africa now? The Chinese. So
And
yeah.
the Chinese, absolutely. A
Yeah.
lot of people don't realize they've been
Oh,
involved in infrastructure and corporate structures and things of that nature. And in the long term, like you said, the long term results of that is going to be one where America won't be able to turn to that as a place where it can have another ally. But let's back up a little bit, Pete, because I think you kind of blew through a couple points. My position has been America has always had a harsh position as relates to race, class, and gender. And what do I mean by that? One, when it was initially set up, it was a group of white landowners from an elite class, and they weren't looking to find some utopic place of people talk about liberty and freedom. They really were focused on how they could improve their own lives. They weren't talking about the non groups in class in that group. We never dealt with this issue of slavery and what that means and race in this country, and we've doubled down on it. How multiple races, not only blacks, Indians, Asians, we've doubled down repeatedly on issues regarding the harshing of race, and it's only when it was forced, America was forced to deal with this reality through the civil rights movement, did some modest gains be made. Now we gotten a little fat and lazy. And you got a guy in the White House now in Joe Biden who I think could do a lot to fix some of that if he's strong enough and willing to take a moral stand. I think his age may be a factor in that. But America's got to deal with that piece. And unfortunately, those willing to use divisiveness as a power play is taking root. And I don't see them I don't see people like that letting that go easily.
no, well, here's what's going to happen, in my opinion. And I'm a deep study of research and history repeating itself and all. Here's what I think is going to happen. I think number one, you're going to see increase negative police actions. I think you're going to see a more exposure of terrorism and white supremacy in the military. I fear that you're going to have a lot more assassination attempts on black and white leaders who are trying to do the right thing, whether it's Benjamin Crump all the way up and down the line. I think you're going to not only you're going to have that, but I fear that what we're probably going to get back into is possibly bumming of churches and things of that nature to send a message, because you got this supremacy, this right-wing extremism everywhere, including the courts. Don't kid yourself, my good lawyer friend. The way they've set it up with the judges now is that, and because of what Roberts did with dismantling the clause with the voting rights, you're going to see an attempt to roll back the 64, 65, and 68 civil rights bills even further. And so I want our folks to take a look at that and give you a good example. When Trump was making a lot of judges, and he only appointed one black judge, remember that, in 4 years, federal judge. One of the questions that was asked during those hearings, what was these judges' opinion on Brown versus the Board of Topeka? And so when you look at some of those reviews, a lot of those folks white folks didn't answer that on the record, but they generally disfavor that, and they were
Right.
extremists. So I hate to say it, but I'm a realist, and I'm telling you, we've got more violence coming, and don't be surprised. The way these guys are going is that they'll bomb a church or something, and the police shootings are going to get worse. Why? Because the union and the police run the country in a lot of ways, and now they got judges in place that are sympathetic. They've convinced the white public that it's all right to shoot somebody with no gun in the hand, in the back, whatever the case may be, and that's part of the teamwork process that I talk about between the Nazi Germany version in America and post Reconstruction. And when we teach our kids about post Reconstruction, the Night Riders, the Bull Connors, and all, even
Well,
before that.
and they don't know that, that piece of history, Pete, is completely brushed over.
Yes.
In school. I mean, it's almost like we don't have time for. But let me say, you just opened a can of worms, and I want to deviate. I know we didn't add this what we want to talk about. You mentioned this thing about the course, and I know that's one of your key focal points that you're aware of. We had the announcement this week of a potential bill to expand the Supreme Court. Joe Biden has already set up a commission to review looking at the Supreme Court and whether it makes sense to expand the Supreme Court. And that was an issue on the election trail, and he was elected. My view is what you see about the Supreme Court is a direct correlation between Donald Trump and the Republicans disregarding the longstanding precedent of not appointing judges during a final term, forcing that hand on Obama, saying, "Okay, we're not going to even give Merrick Garland a review or hearing," and then shoving through, 3 judges on the Supreme Court. What are your thoughts on this new the political strategy about proposing to expand the Supreme Court? How's that going to play politically, and is there a chance that that'll pass?
Well, first of all, it's not going to pass. It's not going to work. See, the thing that I have from a lay position, not from a lawyer position, but a lay position observing, Obama first term should have been like Trump, packing all the judges he could where he had the power to do that. He refused to do that. I mean, this was in his hands, and he just refused to do it. Now, what he did do, if you look at his record versus the number of minorities and all that was appointed by Bill Clinton, Obama stepped up the appointment of more white gay judges, but he didn't necessarily step up the appointment of more black men judges, and then his next group was women. So he missed the boat with that. Even if you stack the court, that's not going to make a difference as to whether they're going to change anything back or whatever, because legal precedent is no more. And understand this: you can stack the court, and then you can still have an Afro-American, for an example. Then maybe we got 2 now in the court, but then you can have one that thinks like Clarence Thomas. And so,
correct.
And so, when you got that, and when you look at, people have talked about term limits on the court. No, that horse has left the barn now. What we have to do is gather up strength in a new coalition. And as I stated before, there are white conservatives that understand that we can't go to the extreme the way the country is going now. So, I really don't see where it's going to make a difference. I think what we got to do is change the laws. And I really think the black community has to understand that us voting alone don't mean anything, because we can't recruit if we don't recruit others, including actually poor whites, to make them see, hey, you being used with this extreme group. That's my thinking.
But I think we're closer than you probably realize, Pete, because one, I think of the Biden election as being evidence of that coalition, and I thought of the election in almost of Stacey Abrams in Georgia, and of Gillum in Florida reflects how close how close it was. Those are very, very close elections, closer elections between Republicans and Democrats in those states, both Georgia and Florida, in a very long time. And I think the next election, these are talking points that are setting up that election. I don't think there's a hell's chance you got of expanding the Supreme Court with the filibuster sitting there the way that it is, and Joe Manchin kind of, signaling the reassuring, white folks that, don't worry, everything's going to be okay, that he would go along with doing that. But I just think that it's a way of saying to the base who had that issue on the platform in the election, we hadn't forgot about. So that when we get to the next election, people yelling, well, what'd you do about it? At least there was a bill that was proposed, a commission that was set up, and by doing so, you kind of feed into that coalition you're talking to. We're going to keep fighting for things that are important to you.
Except
I think that's why.
One thing, Clint, you're forgetting. This is in 2022. It's an off-year election. Black Americans don't pay attention to off-year elections nationwide. They just don't do it. And so when 2022 comes in with congressmen and some senators running and all, they're not interested. When I talk to people, it's okay, I'm going to wait till the next presidential election. I'm going to wait till the next mayor's election. So local elections or whatever that falls in an off year like 2022, or in some states like 2021 where they got to elect a new governor in Virginia, whatever, we don't pay attention to that. And what's hurting us, and we're losing groups that we could get together with, is because we're not consistent. And so, until we understand that every day there's a policy issue that we need to take a look at. Every day we need to recruit people to groom, to take leadership roles, to expand the bench, so to speak. And we don't do that. And that's why I get sick and tired of these quick photo ops and sound bites. Because after that, it's nothing. And that's on us.
I believe that. I think that you got people coming. What happened with Gillum was tragic in his whole career, but I think you got people like Stacey Abrams and other folks that are rising up on a national level. I think within the state legislature, I think you're going to be surprised at how many people really, really amount to come together to really, really push this next governor's election in Florida, I think. And DeSantis, because he's tacked to the right, he's going to have a hard time pulling those independents along. But we got to take a quick break, Pete, pay a few bills, and come back on the other side and talk about, listen, I want to talk about some of this violent stuff that's happening in our country. We want to get an update and prediction on the outcome of the Chauvin trial. Oh, yeah. This new shooting in Brooklyn Center. Then you got the 13-year-old in Chicago and another mass shooting. I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with guns in America and the shooting. So we're going to take a quick break, pay some bills. You're listening to In Touch News Radio, reality radio, where everybody can be a star. We'll be right back after this quick commercial break.
In Touch Radio, where you can listen to a cruising flow of smooth soul and jazz, today's R&B, a fun touch of hip-hop and gospel.
All my music on one station.
Giving you a buffet of music, news, and entertainment. We're In Touch Radio.
It may be hard to believe, but people just like you are already saving money. FeedThePig.org makes it easy. Their simple savings plan teaches you how to start saving without going overboard, so you don't need to start foraging wild berries.
I was skeptical, but these are actually pretty good.
You don't need to sell your soul to the devil.
$15 is the best I can do.
You just need FeedThePig.org. Don't get left behind. Get tips and tools at FeedThePig.org. Brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs and the Ad Council.
Welcome to Calvin's Barbershop.
You all gotta see this.
I don't even want to know what you're looking at on that phone.
Well, you should. I was learning about the dangers of high blood pressure and that we need to get ours checked regularly. High blood pressure can increase the risk of heart attack or stroke, but this text program can help keep it at a healthy range. Just text Barbershop to 97779 to sign up.
I'll get right on it as soon as I'm done with this baby panda video.
Text Barbershop to 97779. A message from the American Heart Association and the Ad Council.
Smoothing out your favorite R&B flavors.
What's your flavor? Tell me what's your flavor.
In Touch Radio.
All right, we are back live on Touch News Radio, reality radio where everybody can be a star. I am your co-host of Straight Up the Middle, Attorney Clint in Paris. I've got nobody other than the world-renowned political and social commentator, Sweet Pete Edwards, on the line with me. Pete, how you doing this morning? Okay. In Florida. Yeah. Right, exactly. I, I was surprised that they didn't anticipate that or have some facts nailed down. Have nailed down whether the car was on or off before that expert comes on. Anticipate that's a fact issue. All you have to do is have somebody testify. Did you turn the vehicle? Was the vehicle on or off? Now, you know, for the most part, you know, in a situation like that, I would suspect that vehicle was on. I could be wrong, but oftentimes in situations like that, the cops leave their vehicles on just in case the dynamics change of some fashion. But I was surprised at that. I don't know in this case. I think people watching this, you're right. Without that video, I would be more inclined to them to give the officer benefit of the doubt. You know, we're in a transition in America, Pete. These videos and dash cams and cameras on the streets and all this kind of stuff, security cameras, they're changing things. They're no longer do you have this officer sitting on the stand with all his awards and badges and plaques and stuff, explaining how he was keeping the world safe when he killed somebody. Mm-hmm. You have the video telling the story now. And interestingly, he didn't get up there and tell the story. So the real story you got was told by the video. And that video really, really is compelling. It's everybody I've talked to you know, conservative, Republican, Democrat, whatever it may be, they've been really bothered by that. And my experience has been when your jury is bothered by what happened, they want to hold somebody accountable.
Yeah,
Somebody's got to pay for it.
They'll do that, but I think they're going to come with the lesser charge. If you remember doing the voir dire, and for listeners, Clint will tell you the voir dire is when the lawyers get a chance to really get into the juror's background. Am I right about that, Clint?
That is when you're questioning the person before the court.
Right, and so there were a couple of jurors that remained on there that I had a problem with, you know, with that some of the comments. And I will remind our listening audience that just because you're black on the jury, I've seen this. I've been on the jury. I've seen doing voir dire and everything else. Just because you're black on the jury doesn't mean that they'll automatically rule for the most serious charge against the policeman. Two things happen there a lot of times. One, black jurors who are conservative believe in honest and professional policing will give the policeman the benefit of the doubt unless it's just some outrageous stuff beyond the video. And two, a lot of blacks don't want to serve on the jury because they feel that if they find a defendant, particular black defendant, not guilty or whatever, that they would be subject to harassment by the police. So it's a crazy thing, but I think you're going to see in that case, there's no question in my mind with the upcoming case with the lady they charged right down the street from the Chauvin trial in shooting that. Yeah,
right.
She would never serve a day. She won't serve a day.
Let's move over to that a little bit. And let's go through what we see in that situation. And that is the lady, she's been on this force for 26 years. She's a trainer. She has some young officers with her that day that she's training. And some people think that, well, she targeted him, you know, for a training opportunity. You know, for these.
No question. No question.
And so he got the classic driving while black situation, and the magnitude of the mistake. You know, the question becomes whether or not does she get held criminally liable for making the mistake. I was surprised how quickly they moved to charge her. Myself, you see in Chicago, it took a lot longer to release the video.
Right.
But they quickly got the video out, and she's been charged now.
Yeah, but that's a smoke screen, Clint. That's a smoke. See, once she said, "O.S., I shot it," that was the pretext to her claiming that it was an accident. Now, people will say you should know the difference between a taser and a gun, and because of the weight and all that. Yeah, you should. Yeah, with her experience, I'm not buying her story that she shot it by mistake. But all you need is, as you know, is reasonable doubt, one way or the other. And I think she set it up like that. Now, the upcoming case in Chicago is a real doozy. Look at it from if I'm a defense lawyer representing the police, if I'm charged, the police officer charged, I would say.
Well, hold on. Let's finish talking about this Donte Wright situation before we move on to the Chicago case.
Oh, they're going to find her not guilty.
Because I'm trying to see how that case in Minnesota affects the other case in Minnesota. You think it will have an effect, the fact that Donte Wright is basically in the same community, and here we have another police situation where, you know, somebody's been shot and killed. Will you think it'll affect the outcome of that case?
Yes, that's why I said before, it's either going to be a hung jury or they're going to find this officer guilty of the lesser three charges they charged him with. I think they were going to do that anyway, and now with the Donte Wright case and the way the lady stated she shot him as a mistake or whatever, I think the jurors who are straddling the fence right now, because you know as well as I do, most jurors have already made up their mind as they go through the rest of the trial. You know that. At least you hope for that if you're trying to advocate for your client. You know what I'm saying? So I think they're going to. I think it's going to have a positive effect on the defendant. I really believe it's either going to be a hung jury.
Yeah, my position is so normally, Pete, when you're a lawyer in a case, you don't have the actual crime video of, so nobody has to tell me what's happening. I can watch what's happening. So the things you're going to tell me are things I can't see in this, and they've done a really good job in this case, I think, in keeping that video in front of the jury, so that you don't have to tell me what I'm watching. I can see what I'm watching. Now you can tell me what I can't see, the toxicology, and you can go and all that kind of stuff. I got a feeling that I don't think the defense did enough to explain away that. I'm going to predict conviction on all charges. Now, let's talk about the lady as it relates to Donte Wright. There was a conviction out in Oakland of an accidental shooting with the taser, and that officer got convicted. And the argument was it was an accident. I think she's probably going to have to end up pleading out to something lesser. It may not be what we think. It may be, where she goes for 3 years and a year, 18 months, she's back home or something that nature. But I got a feeling that the Chauvin trial is going to influence what she does. If he gets convicted, she then on the Donte Wright case is going to plead out.
Be a different case. A lot of people have not followed it, but I followed it. They had a case recently in St. Louis where a black undercover officer that the officers knew, they beat him up and everything else. They charged the officers. They go to trial. Some of the white jurors on there proclaimed to be kind of liberal or whatever, but they found the white officers not guilty of beating up a black officer that they clearly knew, clearly identified himself and all. So
well, let me ask you, Pete, though, but they didn't have the video that you have in see, that video is just striking.
If you have a juror, like I said, I listened to doing the jury selection and the voir dire stuff. If you know yourself, you will have a juror that sits on a jury that before you can get into opening statements already made up their mind where they want to go in this case.
Absolutely.
White people just have a hard time. You can go into some states and cities, and even in Minnesota, that even if the kid was 9 years old with swim trunks on, no guns in his hand, you will find white people that refuse to convict police officers. I mean, they just don't want to do it as long as it's not affecting their kid.
Here, I'm going to go with what I think is the changing of that guard is video. Slowly. I mean, that's and I'm basing that on the discussions I have within the legal community. Video is just terrorizing how convictions and cases are built. Even we do it on the civil side. You go in the grocery store. It used to be, what happened? Oh, I slipped on a banana peel and I fell. Play the tape. And the banana peel is right in front of him. And now the argument is, well, you saw the banana peel. Why did you step over it? And it's clear that's in the person's side of view. And so the video is becoming much harder for us to deal with in the legal community. Now, that's going to play a role in the Chicago situation. Now, let me ask you this. I'm going to get to the shooting first. 13-year-old. He's out in the middle of the night, 2:40 in the morning with some adult. He's got a gun. The gun has already been discharged. There's so many bad things already set up in this situation that's disturbing to people. Did that bother you when you heard those facts? 13-year-old? Yeah.
Identifiable. And so that is an issue. Now, when you look at what's going on with all the violence in Chicago and all, one of the things that's going to be in the officer's favor is that citizens, when they hear the word Latin King, Peace Stone Rangers, MSR 13, all that kind of stuff, that's a turnoff. And they say, hey, this guy 13 years old, got gang symbols out this time of night with a gun and what have you. Where was his parents and all like that? He was a thug from the beginning. Regardless the officer at fault or not, that's one thing. Now, I looked at the interviews that retired police chief Charles Ramsey, who is a respected brother all
Yes.
over the country, and he said that based on the totality of the situation, it was reasonable for the officer to do what he did because of the split moment thing and all. So I first of all, I'd be surprised if they charge the officer, and second of all, if he is charged, I doubt if they'll get a conviction there. They'll probably get maybe a hung jury and try him again, and then after the second hung jury, no. And here's the thing, Clint, as a lawyer, I know it bothers you a lot. We get this habit of always saying we're going to bring the federal involved into these police shoots. Listen, the Justice Department is a part of the police industry. They're not interested in really prosecuting police officers. Every now and then you get one and all. And I remind our audience, I can attempt to shoot a policeman and they're charging with attempted murder. A policeman can kill me, and if he goes into federal court and charged, what's the max generally? No more than 10 years. Now go figure.
Yeah, but you're right about. I mean, there are some bad pieces to this with this kid, and trying to understand how we end up in this place. You know, and I don't like. You know, of course, police are held to very, very high standard. I'm just starting. If what else was that kid supposed to do though? Cop says, "Put your hands up," XYZ, and he still shoots him. How do you explain that?
They hang with the professional responsibility of being a professional law enforcement officer. And when you look at his interviews, you know, while he's clearly upset about how it went down, if I'm a defense attorney representing a policeman in Chicago, one of the first witnesses I'm going to have is that brother, because nobody can doubt his expertise and all. And when you look at the video, even taking out that still photo, it's a real call. I doubt seriously they're going to charge the guy. They won't charge him.
I think the safe thing to do for that community is you charge him and let the criminal system play itself out. And if the jury lets him go, you know, one of the things when I worked for the assistant city attorney's office, I was assistant city attorney. The mayor used to say the neatest thing. She would say, let the citizens decide. Take it to court. And if they decide to pay them, pay them. If they decide don't. I think that gives the police department, the whole legal system, you know, it gives all of it cover. But you want these police trying to shut down crime. You want them, and I'm chasing this guy down the alley. I was talking to somebody the other day. They said, well, why would he run down an alley like that? I mean, it could have easily been a setup for him, you know, for the officer. It's very, very dangerous. But then again, we complain about shootings in Chicago. You know, how do you stop the shootings if you don't have brave officers willing to go down an alley, you know, when there's been a shooting? How do you get both of those at the same time? Well, they get the guns probably from Indiana. They go down to Indiana, buy them, and bring them up to Illinois. Illinois has very strong gun laws. I mean, very, very strong gun laws. But you just go down to Indiana, the gun laws are very lax. You buy a gun and bring it back. You know, but you know, there are a lot of pieces to this, and I think you got to deal with every piece of it. The gun laws, the management of development of youth and parenting, the law enforcement piece, the laws that go along with it. You know, and let me say this. The reason that this is like it is a tough thing to resolve. Chicago and a lot of places in America have a decades-long history of violent struggles and issues, a lot of them based in economics, a lot of them based in inadequate school systems. And then they become cultural, that if you're part of that culture, it's normalized to you. If you're something different, good example, Pete, I don't know if you know this, Pete, I'm from Georgia. My parents were farmers, and we come here in 72 when the schools finally get segregated. Let's go ahead, Pete, you take the call and let you respond to the call. Go ahead. Call. Good morning. Good morning, Carl.
That's what they always be their first result. It's to pull their gun and shoot. I mean, they can, they can trace the guys out later on the day or something, whatever they can, but what makes them so quick to shoot is because they know they have immunity, and it's hard to convict them. So I think we just need to change the way we prosecute how we bring them to trial, and we have a lot of these. Most of the police officers are white, and we always give them white years.
Well, not only that, Carl. Carl, how about this? Add on this for you, Carl. Not only that, but remember, if the kid is white and it's in a high income neighborhood, that's not going to happen. But the kid is a minority in a poor neighborhood, the policing is different. It's a mentality. And now where you see police officers involved in trying to overthrow the country and the whole bit and beating up each other and that kind of stuff, that's why I said earlier in the show, we're in for trouble in this country. We're actually falling apart. And people are afraid of the union. I remember a case, Clint, back probably in the late 70s. There was a case in Hillsborough County where the court off the record said, this is a tough case. I think the officer lied and all like that. But if I do what I need to do, then the union is going to say I'm soft on crime. So you know what they did? They sent the case up for an appeal, and of course it came back 2.5 years later. The judge was right that they never should have charged the kid, but the kid sat in jail for 2.5 years because we had a judge locally who was afraid that the police union was going to charge him with being soft on crime. So there you go. That's all I need to say. Carl,
Absolutely.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. That's true. Okay, and I want to push back on you when you said something earlier on the show that about the Black Lives Matter. But Black Lives Matter. When you said that they wasn't as strong as they were, they wasn't as effective.
Well, you know why? One major reason why. If you look at the makeup of the Black Lives Matter movement, the organization structure up top, forget about the sister that's buying houses all over the place and all. One of the key components that they could have used to really reinforce Black Lives Matters all the way around was to tighten up on black crime. Now look, you can have economic situations a whole bit, but in every racial, ethnic group and all, there is an organized crime element. I've worked it, I've been in it, I've seen it, and when I was younger, probably could have been recruited in it. And where the Black Lives Matters fail is that, number one, in the top structure, they don't deal with you don't have a lot of blacks involved in the top structure except those who just want to profit from it. And they never, how are you going to build support for future Uhurus, future black Muslims, future NAACP members and all like that if we don't address the black crime movement in our community? We can't strike out against white extremists if we don't have a bench. And the reason why we don't have a bench is because the word is still out. I don't care if he shoots my mama, I get him back, but I ain't gonna tell the police nothing. That's crazy. So that's why the Black Lives Matter movement and Blue Lives Matter movement are both fake. And the Blue Lives Matter movement proved that they were fake and just dealing with white supremacy when they didn't even speak out against the cops being beat up and everything in D.C. That was the lip pit for me. Okay. All right, Clint.
Carl, so one call
as we wrap up.
My take on that is that they're new organization, so I would like to give them a little more time to get their feet really solid.
And we're going to deal with that. Our time is running out. And my host, I want to make sure I stay on this show, so Clint's got the last word. Lawyers, they always got the last word. All right, Clint.
Anytime we thank you very much, Carl, for the call. We prefer to hear from callers than having me and you, Pete, yakking, because it gives us a better feel for what's really going on in our community. So, Carl, I want to thank you very much for that call. Let me just say we're going to see what comes out of this Black Lives Matter movement and all these things that people are doing. I just say, I don't care where you are, whatever the issue is, try to do something about it. Don't just sit back and complain about it. And of course, Pete, I appreciate you coming on the show in the morning like this. Appreciate all the listeners. And of course, Anna, we appreciate you in the studio. To all the listeners out there, thank you for joining us. Stay tuned to In-Touch News. Coming up next, The Sole Purpose. You've been listening to In-Touch News Radio, reality radio, where everybody can be a star. We'll be back next week. Everybody be safe. Take care, Pete.
Just want you to know that. All right. Bye-bye. See you next week, everybody.
All right, man. Take it easy. See you later, Pete.